Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 554 of the Constructed Criticism Podcast. I'm your host, Easy, and I'm joined by my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy doing coverage for Laughing Dragon. I didn't even know it was happening, Mace Clark.
Yeah, I think that their invitational thing, they did not I think promote it as much early on. I don't even know if it was even an original thing, but they did it. It was really cool. I got to do the first part of the coverage for that, so that was great. And I'm excited to see their circuit grow and expand with time.
Dude, me
Getting the
too.
West Coast game is awesome.
They seem really nice. I got to talk to them. I talked to them about potentially sponsoring this podcast at I think it was an RC, and they seem really nice. They really care about promoting West Coast Magic, which I think has been kind of historically hard since the Channel Fireball series ended years and years ago, and I just appreciate that. So
yeah, geographically, it's just so much harder.
I mean, it's huge. It's like a huge space, right?
Yeah.
Where there are, it's a long distance between cities, and it's cool. It's cool to see them really dive in and do that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, we are going to be talking about Modern today. Modern is the main topic of the show. We just want to give a shout out to Abe. Abe has work stuff this week, so wasn't able to do the show. And Mason, I just want to thank you. I have family stuff this week. We're recording early. Happy Easter to you as the time of the recording. And I appreciate you just jumping on and doing this with me.
Nah, no problem. I'm always down to bring the people the podcast, and maybe this means they get a little earlier too. So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
It probably will mean they'll do it earlier because I'm bad at waiting. I'm not just going to post this on Thursday when it's going to be available way sooner. But we're going to do a Modern vibe check. And one of the funny things is this is kind of how I wanted this episode to go anyway. Because it's Modern RCQ season, and I feel like Modern RCQ season kind of crept on people quietly. I don't know how you feel about this, Mason, but people are so focused with the RC and being standard, and people are already out here winning RCQs in Modern. And the format is in an interesting place where there are lots of things going on, and it is post-ban after a lot of unbans still. And this is just my opinion. This is how I'm going to start this episode. I'm not sure that the ban did anything other than remove the clear best deck from the format, but the strategy remains. But that's not what the results are saying. So I'm kind of curious, where do you sent me this list, and did you have this list tiered?
No, I tried to categorize the list of things I sent you that we're going to talk. Well, that we're going to try and at least cover today.
Yeah.
Sort of not like a tier list of what's good or bad, but more clumps of decks. So just to read off it to get the idea for the listener at home. I wrote down Energy, Eldrazi, Prowess, Affinity, Amulet, Belcher, and then I kind of put fringe decks, and then I put decks that people always play. Not going to list everything there. No point in that. But basically, the idea being there are, I think, different clumps of things in Modern that people do. So I think for now, until it becomes wholly unplayable, there's going to be someone at your RCQ probably playing Storm, right? That's a deck that people loved in Modern. We saw people playing it when it had no support every now and again at big events, and every now and again they make an okayish run, but now they got some MH3 cards, and
didn't have a 38% win percentage of people were still playing it.
Yeah, exactly. Storm is a highly volatile deck, right? And that it's one of the interesting things. You look at the Frank Carson data, its win rate is 38%, but the confidence interval goes all the way up to 60, right? And so it's they basically there's just no good data on it, right? Even though it has a fairly high sample size. So I sort of tiered those things in that way because I think it was, we talked about wanting to help people get prepared because, you mentioned, some people, it really crept up on them that this was happening. I also think the announcement about so much standard being the focus. Some people thought this Modern season was during the summer, like it normally is, and not starting here in the middle of the spring. So, I think that threw people a little bit. But this is a format that did have a bunch of unbans. Then we had, the Opal Breach situation that sort of, took over Modern for a while. Breach got banned. And I think, one of the interesting things that, you were mentioning, I think that happens pretty generally is sometimes just removing one thing can have huge implications, even if maybe a lot of things stay, you know, in a similar-ish spot, right? So, a lot of the best decks are still around that were competing with Breach, but some of them have changed in why they're a good deck, or like the way they're trying to attack things because this one big force left the metagame, right? And it's interesting to see.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we obviously had the energy ban at the same time, right? But
Mhm.
everybody knew that energy was gonna stay around. Like
Mm.
it was still, efficient creatures just don't have a very high fail rate.
Yep.
If you play one drops that do things, they still do those things. Is that kind of where we should start though? Because at the
Yeah, I think energy is just like you should. I mean, what I've been telling people, at least, I'm curious what you think about this, Spencer. Is like it is sort of just the baseline going to be a pretty good deck in modern because of exactly what you said, right? Low fail rate, highly efficient creatures that can snowball the game, but also can go a bit longer than you would expect, maybe from a bunch of 1 and 2 drops. And that allows them to be just a really good. I would characterize it like a zoo-ish, aggressive Jundi style deck, right? Where you can have these fast draws, but you also can interact.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, like if you played like Bloodbraid Elf-esque Jund in Standard, that's the closer variant to like the level of speed of mid-range format to format than you might expect, because this deck it got slower because it doesn't have like the nut draws from the ban, but it didn't get, I don't know that it got like worse. Like the thing that it lost mostly, in my opinion, was actually the One Ring, like getting to win those games, but its speed and its power kind of remained the same.
Yeah, I would say it got worse at fighting through removal, right? Which was sort
Sure.
of what the Ring and Raptor did, right? They were sort of a bunch of, 2-for-1s, or in the case of the Ring, sort of the only way you can compete with other Ring decks. And if your opponent wasn't playing the Ring but trying to interact a little bit, they just couldn't keep up and you'd overpower them. So they lost some of that staying power and now are much more, like you were saying, Jundi, right? Like you can get an energy deck to the top deck war. They might out top deck you, but it's not a given they're going to win, right?
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, okay, you can actually put them there, where when they had even just Raptor alone, right, would have been really good at just like, oh, ripped a Raptor, oh, got a Johnny, and suddenly there's like 3 bodies on the board. So it lost a lot of staying power and a little bit of burst when it came to the Raptor. So I agree with that. And I think energy is just something you're going to see a lot of people have picked it up because it was so good at the start of MH3. They own those cards and they're just like, well, maybe there's not a modern deck I love. This deck's really good. You're going to see people play it. And it's very easy to splash colors. If you want to play blue for Consign and beat up on Eldrazi, which we'll talk about in a second, I think is like the other deck sort of in the space. That's very easy to do. You can play black to beat up on combo decks, have Bowmasters for those kind of decks, right? There's a lot of easy to, sort of fit a third color in your deck in modern for these hyper efficient game swinging cards. So that's something I think, honestly, we'll obviously talk about energy, I think, as long as it's like a thing in modern, which I expect it to be for a long time. But you could just assume energy is going to be a deck you're going to play against. Whether it's good or bad, it's just very efficient. And people are going to be like, yeah, I own this deck. It's good enough.
Yeah, I think that, it kind of reminds me of like, kind of those like Deathrite Shaman piles in Legacy for a little while. Where it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm just like playing Baleful Strix and Deathrite Shaman. The rest of the cards are just cards, right? And like, this deck is like, I'm playing the most effective 1-drop removal, I'm playing the most effective 1-drop creatures, and then I'm playing like card advantage engines like Pyromancer and Fable, and then like Flage is my top end, and like, it's funny. I saw a tweet the other day about this deck that I thought was really interesting about like, every time I feel like I flip into Johnny, I feel like I'm cheating. And in testing for the RC, I very much felt that way. To the point where I almost played this deck. I'm curious now if it even feels more that way than before. Just because, like, there are still Mox Opal decks, but like, if you flip it into Johnny against any fair deck, it is a beating.
Yeah, especially like with the red permanent, right? To like shoot down opposing creatures,
Yeah.
sort of grow my board, kill your board, or grow my board, put you to lethal in the next turn with another activation. That is a very powerful angle of attack to this deck. And I do think that it's like Johnny is a big part of its staying power. I know I've been playing a Mox Opal Emery Tameo deck for the last couple of weeks and really liking it. And like I have Pithing Needle in the main so that I can name Bombardment or Flip Johnny. Like that is its core, that's its home. Obviously, it goes other places, it's good, but like that's the thing that like pushes me over the line on having it main at least. And so I expect that to be, indicative of, I should say this, to me, that's indicative of just how powerful a Johnny is. Yeah. Right? It's like I have all these available options. I'm giving up cards that are hyper effective other spots because this is so good here. And I could sideboard it, but I want that power in game one. And I think Energy is really good at just putting people to the test if they're playing a fair deck. And one of the things I actually like about Energy personally is that I think it's actually pretty hard. It's not easy deck. Hard. Yeah, like there are some draws, obviously, someone's thinking about the time their opponent went like, Guide into Ocelot Pride, Bombardment removal spell, and they died or whatever. But like outside of like crazy draws, whatever, which all the modern decks have, you actually have to think a lot about, does this removal matter here? How should I sequence my threat? If they have interaction, what goes on here? And I really like that. I think the games are, they're very bread and buttery of Magic, but I think that's good to have in a format like Modern. It can't all just be, Affinity, Amulet, Belcher time,
Yeah, I don't want to like go too far into this point, but I do want to mention that like LSV and I had a very similar opinion. It was after the Modern Pro Tour with Energy, and he's like, Static Prison has to be the worst playable Modern card. And I was like, yep, yes it is. Because dang, do you not have a better option than that? But also like it not only is it like not that good of a card because of its weaknesses, but also like it makes you have to think even harder in a deck that requires like a lot of like pre-planning.
Mm-hmm.
So
Energy is a tough deck, and it can be a little finicky sometimes. And then I think, we mentioned a second ago, but like the other sort of staple of Modern for the time being, in my opinion, at least, is sort of the Eldrazi cards, right? Like, this deck got Ugin, whether that's original Tron or, kind of the Teamer / green-red builds that we saw be a bit more popular before Ugin's release. And really, the power of the MH3 cards being shown in full force here, and this being the other end of the spectrum, right? Energy is kind of this fair, efficient deck that you see a lot of people play. Eldrazi is kind of you're trying to play good, clean, fair Magic. No, you're not. I'm crushing you. You can't win.
I haven't seen anybody actually playing Tron Land still. Like, and I think that this is I have a next weekend. I am the Modern seat for a Legacy Standard Modern team event. And most of the decks that I've looked at, there are two style of decks that I'm looking at to play. They are either Emery piles or Ugin piles. And to me, like the thing that this deck does is it says, no, we're not playing. If you think we're playing fair Magic, you are going to be sorely disappointed. And you were on the design team for this, but I have talked to a lot of people with the card Ugin's Labyrinth. And like Soul Lands are in Modern are just so much above rate, even of the efficiency that other decks have gotten, that it's kind of ridiculous. Like I don't see a world in which, I mean, you had a Kozilek's Command, for example, on your pick 2 set review for that set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like I don't think anything's changed for this deck. Yeah, it struggles with its struggles, right? Like, whether you're playing a Karn version or a non-Karn version, you're going to struggle with combo decks. But Karn only fixes the artifact version of combo decks; it doesn't fix the other versions. I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, this deck is not the number 1 performing deck on MTGO. But it's the number 1 performing deck in my heart, Mason. So I gotta know what your opinion is.
Yeah, I think the thing that I think players often underappreciate is the cost to get that soul land, right? Like if I gave you Ancient Tomb that was only for Eldrazi, right? Like 2 life only cast Eldrazi spells. I think I would totally understand where a lot of people are coming from. And I still understand like, land that produced 2 mana turn 1, incredibly powerful, obviously. But you do have to add a lot of these 7 drops to your deck, right? Yeah. And that makes your curve like kind of awkward. And if you don't have this soul land, now your deck has 8 of them for Eldrazi, don't get me wrong. You're gonna have 1 probably in a game. But if you don't have specifically that one, the non-Eldrazi parts of your deck kind of stumble a little bit. And these decks are kind of like 3 to 4 colors if they're teamer, right? Like the colorless part of the deck is a real part in a non-zero number of games. Now, I think it's not a huge number of games. Like you have a lot of colorless lands, but I've definitely played this deck a good bit because I have a lot of faith in the Eldrazi cards. And, I've just been like, yeah, I can't cast my Kozilek's command on turn 3 because I took a mulligan and, I kept a Hand of Utopia Sprawl, into a sowing Myco Spawn or whatever. And I'm locked into playing the Myco Spawn, where I really wish I could remove this thing.
Go finish your thought.
I was going to say that the deck is very powerful, but it does stumble a little bit. But most of the decks can't punish it for stumbling that are like playing fair Magic, right? Yeah. They just aren't quick enough. Energy sort of being the only one, which is still sort of a good matchup for Eldrazi if you build your deck the right way, which lots of players do because of how popular Energy is. And so it becomes a thing where it's like, yeah, you lose the combo a lot, like you said, right? Because they actually do punish you when you're playing things like Devourer or Myco Spawn to go get a land to try and set up a big play because they're just winning the game. So I think Eldrazi is strong. And if, I think any weekend this season you were to hand me Eldrazi and told me I had to play it, I probably would not be brutally upset. But there are going to be some weekends I'm way happier than others.
One of the funny things is we were at the RC, and I think it was round 2. I was in the 0-1 bracket, and Abe comes up to me. He's like, what happened? I was like, I played against my worst matchup. And he sits for a second. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm thinking what Eldrazi's worst possible matchup would be. I was like, oh, it is what you probably think it is. He goes, did you play against Burn? And I was like, yep. I sure did. Did not expect that this weekend. But I did get 2-1 by Burn. And I think that, like, the fact that Burn has such a good matchup against this deck kind of speaks volumes about, like, what the deck is. That's not the type of deck it's trying to beat. It doesn't... It is erasing that style and that, essence of the format from its memory. It's like, no, we are trying to only win in the winner's metagame on this axis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool. One of the other things that I think about what you said, though, is interesting, is that if you look at the challenges, the Temur decks don't do anything. Mm-hmm. If you look at the 5-0s, the Temur decks do everything.
Yeah.
And it's so weird to me that, like, Mono Green and Green Red own all the challenge results, and Temur owns all the 5-0 results. Why do you think that is?
Because more of the best decks get played in challenges because the incentives are more to win. And so these more linear, targeted towards a certain thing that's going on decks are succeeding, or the deck that has a broader range of things is succeeding in leagues, where leagues have a wider pool of people trying stuff. You're still going to run into the energies of the world, whatever, in leagues, but you're going to also run into zombies or whatever, where, your consigned memory is like a really good sideboard card, right? Or this thing you have. So that's how I've reasoned it. Obviously, it's a little bit of an oversimplification. Magic's really complicated, but that's kind of like the logic that, I think
that's where I've landed also. It's like, okay, well, like, I guess this works. I'm curious, though, because you and I are talking about RCQs for our listeners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where should they land?
Yeah, I think if you're an Eldrazi person, like let's say you own the Eldrazi cards, you should probably be thinking about what you've seen locally and what's going on in the metagame, remembering that real life typically lags at least a week behind what's going on online, right? And you should be changing your deck up consistently. In the aggregate, like in the dark, I would tell people to probably play, something like the Temur decks, just because I expect there to be at your local RCQ a more wide range of decks, because not everyone on RCQ's goal is to win above all else, right? And that's sort of the only reason for the challenges, right? the incentives are just way different. So that's sort of where I stand. But if you play your locals a bunch and there's a lot of decks that are really bad against the green red build, and yeah, obviously the teamer stuff would cover some area, but your metagame maybe looks more like the Magic Online one where you have a very spiky field, then I would tell you to maybe stray away from the teamer builds.
Yeah, I'm in a similar spot. I think that, like, I'll just say where I'm landing is, like, pretty close to green-red. Like, not there to mono-green yet. Just because I think it's so hard to know what people are going to show up with at, like, for me, this event is, like, hopefully a 2K. But, like, it's a modern Legacy standard. And I think that's, like, way closer to, like, what a lot of people's RCQs feel like, where it's like people are showing up to like their first big tournament or like a tournament that they like are close to that feels big for them. And I would hesitate to like pull the trigger on mono green, which I think looking at the data looks like the best performing version of this deck, because you are so honed in on the winner's metagame. But if you run into like mill or burn or whatever, you're like, oh, actually I have 0% chance to win now.
For what it's worth, I would actually expect your metagame to look more like Magic Online than I would in RCQ.
My metagame?
Yeah, not because of where you live,
just because
it's a team event.
Oh, sure.
Because think about, like, you don't want to play, like, let's say you could play, your Oops All Spells deck in Modern or Energy, and your friends are taking it seriously and they're playing their best decks. Are you really gonna, you know what I mean? Like, are you gonna really Goblin Guide? So that's typically like, I often tell people that team events, I expect things to be more, because you never want to be the person that lets it down. And I often joke too that, like, if there is a team where one of the decks is weird and you're mulliganing, you should expect to be playing against something crazy, because they're often, it's like that friend group or whatever. That's obviously overgeneralization, but
no, you're good, man. I'm gonna change it up on the order of which you text me.
Well, actually, I really want to talk about the next one, because I think you talked about Burn, and Prowess has entered the metagame.
Oh, okay, cool.
And like, we don't need to spend a ton of time talking about this if you don't want to, but I do think this is a big knock against the Eldrazi decks. And if your local area is picking up Prowess, which I've seen a lot of people actually be excited to play this, at least locally here, because they had the Prowess deck before, and now they just need a couple new cards and the Cord Cutters, and they're ready to go, right? And these decks are filling that burn space, which has not been really, a bursty red aggressive deck has not been good in Modern for a while for various reasons. The biggest one, I think, being Flage. And this Prowess deck actually, can burst through it. And we showed it on coverage a couple times with the Laughing Dragon thing. And man, Spencer, I watched this guy get, picked apart. Like, every turn he got interacted with, something happened. He plotted a slick shot on one turn, and then he just 20'd a guy from hand. Like boom, 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 you're dead. And that is like such a bursty different part of the metagame that I do think it isn't clear to me that this is a top deck in the same ranks as Energy and Eldrazi, but I think there are a burn alternative in Modern that is like looks to be realistic.
It's funny. I don't know if it was in the team testing for our Patreon's Discord or our Patreon Discord, but I talked about I've been a Slickshot believer forever. Like, I'm like, yeah, the mice are good, but like, this card is like actually busted. Like, you need a lot of things to make mice work. You need spells to make Slickshot work. And the first time that I played the Prowess deck in Standard, I was like, oh, yeah, this is beyond Standard. This is at least Pioneer playable. And then when my friend Matt Kling texted me from Opposed to the Show and was like, have you read this Quarry Steel Cutter card? I was like, oh, I didn't even know it hit Legacy yet. Like, I didn't even...
You mean Modern? Or I know it hit Legacy as well.
Yeah, I think he was looking at Legacy.
Gotcha, yeah.
But I was like, okay, we have reached the like the pinnacle for this card. The first time that I read this card, I was like, I had not finished my doc. I still haven't, because I'm always bad at finishing these docs of like playable cards. I just don't have the time. I always want to do it, but don't do it. And the first time I read it, I was like, oh, okay. I guess red just has a cheaper version in some ways than white for their prowess creatures to just come out every turn. And that was one of the things that like the crab tear decks really liked about Bant, is that they got Menastori Mentor out of the board. And the fact that you get it for cheaper, and it's
I mean, Core Cell Cutter is way better than Monastery Mentor. But
oh yeah, I agree.
They're totally different cards too, to be fair.
I know, but I'm just saying,
yeah, I get what you're saying.
I just think that like it's 1 mana cheaper, and haste and trample, and like all this stuff, like it is a game changer. And the fact that like you can trigger Slickshot off of it and go off with both of them is just wild.
Yeah, well, I think that, yeah, it definitely is. I think the biggest thing is like the modern format, you just have the 0 mana spells that are actually good.
Yeah.
Right? Like Lava Dart on the flashback, like Lava Dart your pride on turn 1,
Yep.
turn 2 plot, turn 3, Corey Steelcutter, flashback my Lava Dart, hit you for 5, that's like not even that great a turn, and that's pretty strong. Right?
Yeah.
And when you combine that with like, I believe it's called Violent Surge, the, Delirium double strike spell from Duskmourn, that suddenly, that with mutagenic growth and a bobble, you're 20ing somebody just very easily.
Yeah, and it actually doesn't matter which side you have too, right? That some of that works with both Slickshot and just with the Quarry Steel.
Yeah, and you still have Mentor. I'm sorry, Monastery Swiss Spear, pardon me.
Yeah.
And Soulscar and some builds, and Bedlam Reveler and others. Like, there's just a lot of prowessy or aggressive creatures in these decks, and you just kill people very quickly and very effectively. It's a really strong deck. I don't know if it's like one of the best decks in Modern yet, but I think it is like a totally reasonable deck. And if I lost to the prowess deck, I wouldn't be, like, dang, I got like unlucky to run into that deck. It's like, oh, that's a reasonable thing to happen to me.
Yeah, I bought the Slickshot green red deck, and this is one of the decks that I'm considering playing for just the RCQ season, just because I love Slickshot so much. So I'm glad we got to talk about it.
What did you want to talk about though?
I wanted to skip over Affinity and just go to Amulet really quick.
Sure.
We can go back to Affinity because I do think that the change of that deck is interesting. But I think it's interesting how Amulet has gone recently. And we talked about it like a few weeks ago on the podcast. But I think it's wild that we went from the easiest version of Amulet ever to the hardest version of Amulet ever, back to 4 Titan Amulets. And I don't know if the deck was too hard, if the math was wrong, if analysts got worse. Like, do you know what happened?
I guess my question to you is, for like the listener and myself, what exactly you mean? Like the builds became more.
Oh, they
like,
became. It was no longer a Titan deck. Like, it was an Aftermath Analyst looping deck that took longer on average than a Titan kill, but was more consistent, and that also took more steps. To now we're like, we are fully back to the Titan builds.
So are you looking at the Magic Online results?
Yes.
Well, so that you just can't do like your opponents just won't concede, right? Like it just takes too long to do the Aftermath Analyst stuff consistently online.
So you think that if you were playing paper, you would just play the Analyst version still?
Oh, I mean I believe so. Yeah, I mean, assuming we're talking about the same deck, in my mind, very similar to what we saw during the Breach format.
Yeah,
just with different side. Yeah, like if I would play that build. Yeah, and when talking to Dom and I covered our Amulet a couple times in that Laughing Dragon event, so you can get some of his site. He seemed to think that was like the good build of the deck or the stock one. That's the one that we saw all those players have in paper. So now maybe that's like, him on coverage not wanting to disparage a build, right? Or something like that, that sometimes you don't want to be rude or whatever. So I don't want to put words in his mouth.
He's on like 3 to 4 analysts, 4 scape shift, like 100%.
I don't want to put words in his mouth once again, because like he was maybe just being nice for coverage. I don't want to speak for him. You can check out Dominar's judgment, I guess, for that. but it seemed to me like he felt it was pretty natural. And it makes a lot of sense to me too that like if you think the format is faster, playing a bunch of scape shifts and things of that nature is good. And if you think the format's more, better at handling the scape shift stuff, then maybe going back to Titans is good. So it could be that the Titan players feel this way, and I just feel differently than they do, right?
Sure.
And it could also be that like prowess has like changed things too, right? Like I would imagine prowess would make me want to be faster with scape shift, but maybe it had other knock-on effects that I'm not fully appreciating.
Okay.
That would be my answer. I don't know for sure.
I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting wrinkle to the format where people were winning both online and in paper with this analyst version, and then have suddenly shifted all the way back to Titan when I was looking at results, and it's like, well, why is that? Like, what would cause a sudden shift? What's funny is that none of them started cutting scape shifts. Everyone is still on the scape shift plan.
Yeah, so I'm looking at House of Mana's first place list from the Modern Challenge on 4/12, which is a week ago at the time of this recording. And this is basically what I was expecting. And House being sort of one of the like amulet people. It's the first deck list you open when you open.
Okay, yeah, I have it up now.
Yeah, this is what I would expect. So
okay.
Like I do think the fourth Titan's technically, cuttable or whatever, but this all makes sense to me that like you just play the core good package of cards.
Even this though, it's got Force Spelunking and no what's her name? No 3-drop
Azusa?
No, not that one. The other one.
Dryad of the Elysian
Grove? Yeah, Dryad, thank you. Yeah, no Dryads. Like,
well, there's no Valakut in the deck, right?
Oh.
So
we are just on Aftermath Analyst, like.
Yeah, this deck is an Aftermath.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think this went, what, 10-0? Or 8-1?
Yeah, 8-1 first in the Swiss. So, yeah, I mean, this is sort of what I was expecting. Yeah, I think you do see like Nathan the Guilt Leap, someone who played a lot of Amulet in the past and a lot of Breach in the recent era and actually qualified for the mocks recently. If you look at his deck list, he does have one Dryad, right? Yeah. But he's also trying out a bunch of stuff in this build. Like he has a bunch of Green Sun Zeniths, which most players have seemingly moved off of. So like there is, I think, still some delineation. Delineation is a bad word. Some like figuring out basically what's going to be the real stock build of Amulet. And one of the things that, I really wanted to mention near the end of the episode, but I'll mention right now, is just like there's a lot of focus on the standard RCs. Like the American one, the European one, and the Canadian one are all in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so that's going to make it to where even though it's modern season, a lot of people like I know Nathan personally. Like I know he's sort of like I'm doing some things in my free time, but I'm focusing on standard.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's a lot of like, we are going to get around to modern and we're going to let it shake out a little bit. Modern moves slower anyways. Let's see how this Corey Cutter affinity stuff looks in the next couple of weeks in Ugin. And then after our RCs, we still have like a month and a half of RCQs to figure it out, before then the RC proper. So I do think that we're seeing a little bit maybe of slowness in that regard.
That's totally fair. I agree. I'm glad we got to talk about that. I think the next thing that we should talk about are 3 cards.
Okay.
Emry, Mox Opal, and Lava Spur Boots.
Well, I as much as I love Lava Spur Boots, and I was playing that card a lot, I think Corey Steelcutter basically supplants it.
I do too. But the number of lists that you see that are like, well, I can get Lava Spur Boots off of my sagas. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lava Spur Boots is really strong. Like, going to grab that with your Emry, especially if you have a combo kill, like the Jessica Ascendancy builds do, that's really strong. And then also just grabbing it, putting on a Kappa Cannoneer is good. Or, sometimes you just main phase activate your saga, right, on chapter 3, and being able to haste a construct from there is just a burst of damage. So I really like the card Lava Spur Boots. I've been really high on that card since its release. And, I'm cooling on it a bit. I do think it's better in like the Urza proper decks. But Yeah, the Emery, I would say Emery, Tamio, and Mox Opal.
Yeah,
Right.
I knew that you thought I was going to say Tamio, but that's why I threw you for a loop. So
Yeah, those three cards are just a really strong core. And I think we're in this really interesting spot in Modern where it's unclear what the best thing is, but there are lots of things succeeding. So we're seeing the Affinity deck do well, right? Like at the Laughing Dragon event, both including the 20K going on today at the time of this recording, Affinity was doing quite nice. I know that one of the players went undefeated and drew into the top 8. We saw that this deck did pretty well in the Magic Online showcases. Then we've seen Corey Baumeister and friends really supporting like the Thopter Foundry build of the deck and using the cards in that way, or the Urza, much more actually, I would say 2020-ish, right before the Mox Opal ban, going back to that era. And then we saw players like Luna Love actually lose playing for the Mox with like the Jessica Ascendancy build and sort of playing like a combo focused version of the deck, right? And so I think there's a lot going on right now, and when I say combo, I mean like really focused on the combo. And then we also saw, Jerry Thompson talked about it a little bit over the past couple of weeks, and some players actually who won that mock showcase doing basically the Jessica Ascendancy thing with Corey Steelcutter as the backup plan.
yeah,
And it's also just your win condition, right? It used to be you needed to have like this Aether Spellbomb to clear the way of blockers. Well, now you make your creature infinitely big, you play your Corey Steelcutter, right? It gives trample haste, and you kill them, and the game's over. So
yeah, I got to talk about kind of this package and like the decks because one of the really nice things that I had mentioned on the show, I think 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, was just like Kethis gets all of the combo by itself and feeds like a breach by itself. Like you actually don't have to do more work. But the difference is that you don't actually have to combo off that way if you're playing Corey Steelcutter, because you just win naturally before then. And
yeah, and you get to play a lot of interactive cards too.
And that is actually really interesting, where that becomes more close to kind of like the peak of what the Breach deck was doing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I've been playing a lot of the Jessica Ascendancy deck. I think it's like quite strong, and it does remind me kind of Breach. Like if I get an Emery and an Ascendancy, I just kind of win. And I also sometimes just play my Ascendancy and just play like Jeskai interactive deck or whatever. My opponent over sideboards for me, and I just win. Or like they're really holding up some stuff. And I think the biggest thing that really sold me on this deck was like seeing how many of the sideboard plans like Luna had that were like like at least shaped the sideboard, I should say, where it's just like we side out all the Jeskai Ascendancies and we just play Jeskai. You know what I mean? And it's like your opponent. I've played a lot of matches with this deck so far, and I've played against a lot of like, here's this random graveyard hate thing to stop your combo, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, Corey Steelcutter, attack you, you're dead. Like interact, spell pierce, Flame of Anor, pick thing up with Tamio, do it again. That sort of stuff is just really, really strong. So I think Kethis like does enable this combo kind of on itself and is like a better combo deck. It is worse at being the fair games.
I agree,
and the fair games matter a lot.
I don't want to go too far. Like we didn't really mention Affinity, but I do want to know how many casts would you play?
I don't know. Honestly, I've seen a lot of people with 6 recently, and so I guess I would just start there. But the Affinity deck is very strong and just uses the same sort of idea we just talked about, just without a combo finish, right? And kind of more burst with a bunch of thought cast effects and having Kappa Cannoneer main, and Kappa Cannoneer or Shadow Spear just beats a lot of decks.
Yeah,
it's just really strong.
And then kind of not the final one, but one of the final things that we should probably talk about is just Belcher winning big events.
Like, yeah, the Belcher deck is kind of good, right?
But yeah, I don't know how this is a deck that Matt and I have played online quite a bit, and it's funny because Belcher has this like very hardcore following. I think I said this in the podcast, but like I would recommend the Belcher Discord. There are people that like care very, very deeply for this deck in Modern, and I think that they are the back of the reason that this deck exists. Is that they have tried so hard to make their beloved continue to exist in this format, And I'm impressed with what that community has done for what seems like on paper should not be this good of a deck in the format. But I do think the Belcher community actually has lifted this deck to the stratosphere that it could be at.
I'm curious, what do you not like about the Belcher deck? Because I have one thing that I really don't like about it, but it sounds like you're kind of low on it too.
I don't know that I'm low on it. I think that like
here's a question. Let's say you're going to the team event and Matt's like, well, somebody is like, hey, I paid for your entry, but you have to play this deck, and you're like, whatever, sure. And it's Belcher. Yeah, okay.
My thing is like, I like the blue version a lot better for what it's worth, because I think that
I'm only talking about the blue version.
Yeah, I think that it fits into the format better than the previous iterations had. And you know, I've covered this deck at 1Ks for like a long time because we have like very good Belcher players in Utah, part of that community. My problem with the deck might be different than yours. I just think Lotus Bloom is like not that good of a card.
Well,
go ahead.
Okay. No. That's interesting. I think so. That's what you don't like about the deck, is that it's like reliant on the bloom in a lot of games.
I mean, the thing is I don't know if the blue deck is. Like, that deck is able to play interactive games where it's not, which is why I like that deck more.
Yeah, for what it's worth, when I'm talking about Belcher, and I think, just to be clear, I only mean the mono blue deck. I don't mean any of the weird other variants. Yeah. And I think that's typically what's going on these days. I think the Tameshi stuff has like supplanted everything else with a great backup plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like the deck, one of the things that I like about it is that it is a good Lotus Bloom deck, but it doesn't need Lotus Bloom. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like in the past, decks lived and died by their Bloom draws.
Yeah.
And this deck, in some matchups, definitely has that happen where it's like you need to be like super fast and interactive. But this deck has enough interaction. That's what I like about the deck, is that it is sort of a combo deck that has the first stop for the opposing combo deck. What I don't like about the deck is that it is kind of slow, right?
That's my thought.
Okay. Yeah, like you're a turn 4-ish deck at best, right? Now there are technically like some weird lines where that's not true, but like from my understanding, it's basically your turn 4 deck.
It's funny though, because like you're not really a turn 4 deck because it's like deterministic that you've already won the game.
Yeah, kind of. Well, look, here's the thing: like your deck randomly does just lose sometimes, right?
Yeah, because, absolutely. It's not right. So it's not actually deterministic.
Yeah, it's just weird, right? Like, here's a great example of like one of the awkwardness of the deck is like you sometimes need to put that mountain in your deck because you just auto lose if your opponent Boseijus or Why the Reliquaries or Ghost Quarters affects your land. The game's just over because you're that turn 4 deck. Losing a turn, especially with a pressure attached to it, is game ending. Well, sometimes you have your turn 4 kill, you Belcher me, and your mountain was the 6th card in your deck, and I'm not dead. You know, and it's like, we have to go another turn, right? And that is a lot.
It's a lot. It's so much time.
Yeah, and there's just like a bunch of weird things that overlap in awkward ways. Like that Pithing Needle I talked about can like be very easily beaten. Seek into Stupor, lots of counter spells into the Flood Maw. But you do have to like have that beforehand or it adds that turn, right?
Yeah.
And then there are some decks that you just randomly are very cold to. Like I watched Mill play against Belcher the other day, and he couldn't stop the belching, but it didn't matter. He didn't have enough cards to kill the Mill player, right? So it was like, you just literally couldn't win in time. So I think there's a lot of awkwardness to your combo, and when you look at that compared to Amulet Titan, I'm just like, unless you really love this style of deck, I don't know why at a competitive level you wouldn't do X or Y. But I do think it's like a really good deck with a surprising amount of play to it that people underappreciate. I think they write off as like not a real deck, when in reality, I think if you're preparing for an event, you need to have a plan for Belcher.
I'm going to rapid fire and not respond, and you're just going to give opinions really quick because we got to wrap this up. You ready?
Do we need to wrap it? Okay.
No, I mean, we don't have to.
Sure.
This topic has just gone a while, so I just want to. I want to get some more decks in than we normally could have.
Okay.
Hollow One.
Not good.
Ooh. Okay. Storm. We talked a little.
Not good.
Not good. Blue Black Murktide.
Not good. Worst deck in Magic history. I legit think it's one of the worst decks I've ever seen.
Domain Zoo.
Good deck. Underplayed.
Okay. Yogg.
I will say bad, even though I always went with Yogg. I've come to the conclusion I just literally
played it. Hurts my heart.
Yeah, I win like 80% of my Yogg games, and everyone else loses 80% of their games. So I'm assuming at this point it's just like a player differential. So I'm gonna say bad. I like Yogg a lot. I think Yogg's underappreciated. I would play Yogg before I played Storm or Murktide.
Black White Ketramos.
Odd deck. It's kind of dipped a little. I think it's good. Has a big problem with things like Eldrazi, Affinity, and still sometimes loses to its good matchups because it's a little clunky.
Mill.
So we talked about this back when the BNR happened about how we thought Mill would get worse because of Breach. I think the Corey Steelcutter decks have actually been really good for the Mill deck. So I'm going to say better than I thought it would have been, but I'm not on pull the trigger yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to give a comment on this one. Worst deck that people think is good. Brute Skill combo?
I think Brute Skill combo is way better than Murktide. Like, Dimir Murktide is that deck.
But you just said that was the worst deck in Magic history. That's not a high bar.
Yeah, well, I guess like that's it's not actually the worst deck, but it statistically is one of the worst decks in Magic history when it comes to like high level events. Like,
is it Storm worse right now?
Well, yeah, but Storm's confidence interval is higher. The thing about the Murktide confidence interval, if you look at Frank Karsten, is it's flat, baby. We know exactly that this deck is like a 42%er, and
it plays out like a 38%er.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it is 42. That is what you get. That's what you give. But Storm, sometimes you high roll the 68. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, just for it's worth like very quickly, my 30-second diatribe of Murktide is like the deck can easily win, and it hits the right matchups, it will be good. It is just very volatile, and it is working really hard to do what other decks are doing much better. If you like that style of deck, by all means play it. But if your main goal is winning above all else, I would look elsewhere.
I'm just going to add on to that. I think that like Domain Zoo, for example, does what Murktide is trying to do way better.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, put up a clock, protect the clock, right?
Yeah,
Interact
it's just way better.
Yeah. And the nice part about Domain Zoo too, right, is like some of your interaction are just burn spells.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just bolt your opponent and they die.
Yeah.
Like that is underappreciated.
Blue White Control.
Not very good, but I think it's getting there. The move to the deck being a prison deck and really being an Orange Chant deck, nice.
Yeah, I've lost the Jeskai version of this deck a couple times.
Yeah.
Always bugs me. All right, that is going to do it for the main topic. Don't forget our sponsors, Mana Traders. Use the code.
Wait, Spencer, hang on. There's one last deck. I didn't put it here because I knew we wouldn't talk about it. We got to talk about 4-color Gifts on Giving E-Witness Control. Best deck in Modern.
Go for it.
No, someone like top-aided challenge with like basically Eternal Witness, Ephemerate, and Orange Chant, which someone did really well in one of the mock qualifiers with.
Why basically you just block.
Well, because for gifts you get Eternal Witness.
Get all of them. You get all. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, so you lock your opponent because you get Scepter, Enchant, Eternal Witness, and something else. I can't remember. Oh, Sylvan's Reclamation, or something like that.
Like a Mason deck, like no other.
Yeah, and you just lock your opponents out. I've run into you all in the streets. I've listened to the podcast listeners, and they're like, "Oh no, not this." I'm in the streets. I'll find you. I will make you play 50 minutes of Magic. But no, it's actually surprisingly good. Much like the blue-white control decks, but I think those decks are just better. I can't like fully recommend them.
Sure. Check out our sponsor, Mana Traders. Use the code CCMTG3 right now to get to help us out. You can click the link in the show notes. Untapped.gg, same thing. Click the show notes. The best arena deck tracker, and then check out the swag store. I got a mug I'm supposed to send Abe. It's literally on my counter right now. It looks pretty cool. Always improving. Mason, what did you do to be always improving this week? What did you do to get better at Magic or life in general?
I hit gold in League of Legends, baby!
I know. I knew it was going to be yours.
I did it. I got my yearly goal. My goal by the end of the year was to hit gold in League, and I did it in April. And so it feels so good. And the always improving thing was just doing everything that I talk about in coaching, we talk about in Magic, and having it work in another spot. And honestly, getting coaching from League of Legends coaches and hearing how similar their process is to like the stuff that I teach and we talk about in Magic, and just how if you do put the time in, you do put the work, you can succeed at these things. And let me tell you, League ranked games have as much, if not more, variance than your Magic RCQ. You can make it to the RC if you put in good work and dedication, do the right things, and just focus on yourself and always improving with yourself. You know, I met someone who, like, from those coaching, and we chit chat a little bit, and that person has been playing a lot longer than me and is stuck 2 ranks lower than me now, at the time a rank lower. And they were talking about all these things about their teammates. Sounds like, yeah, but we can only do what we can do, right? Like, it doesn't matter if I draw, you know, my opponent draws the nuts, you know, and they turn to me with Storm every game. That just won't happen on a long timeline. You can't succeed. And that was where I was improving moment, was really, I buckled down. Spencer, I went on a loss streak the day before. I lost a bunch of games. It was tilting. I had a moment of like, am I supposed to change what I'm doing when it comes to like the character I'm playing, like swapping decks? And I was like, no, lock in, just do the right things. And I got there 30 minutes before my vacation ended, and I had to go do commentary. It was sick. You know, and just reminded me of like when I first queued for RPTQ. You know what I mean? Like, it was so exciting. And also, I had a win in a couple days earlier for gold that I lost, and it felt like the first time I lost playing for the Pro Tour, Spencer. I was heartbroken. It was devastating. It's so cool. So
I remember, you'll get this, Mason, but I remember when you posted it, I was like, you must feel like when I hit K. Rool on Elite Smash right now. Like, and I actually sent your screenshot to Matt. I was like, Mason hit this goal. And I was like, he's got to feel like the first time that we hit, like, Elite Smash. And
if you watched Blue Lock Season 2, when they yelled goal at one point, in an iconic moment, I yelled gold louder than that and longer than that in this room, and I jumped out of my chair. It was so hype. I just couldn't calm down.
For me, I spend my week with my family, and I've really been focusing on my mental health the last couple of weeks. You know, cutting things that I think don't help with my depression. Like, I drink a lot less alcohol right now. I have less spending, like splurge spending and things like that, and really just focusing on time with my kids and with my wife. And it's really helped my mental health, and in all honesty, like, has actually helped my approach to Magic in a lot of ways, where, like, when I sit down to play Magic, I am focusing on the Magic, or the thing that I'm going to focus on, even outside of Magic. Like, when I play Smash, when I play, even this week I played Mario with Maxwell. We played Mario 3D World, and it was about the Mario. It wasn't about just time with Maxwell. It was kind of refreshing, and I think that, like, there's some clarity and focus that you talked about during your Always Improving Month that I think you kind of always need when you're going to improve at something. That, you know, you have to remove things that get in the way of those things. You talked about bad mindset or variance or things like that. And I just think, like, when it comes to the food you eat, the things that you put into your body, the tone that you have in the voice in your head can really hurt you in these things. And I've really been focusing the last couple of weeks, since I missed the show last week, on just fixing that.
That's great. I mean, I think, you know, it's not a surprise that so many people, when things in their life are going well, or they solve a huge problem, some big thing comes with them in Magic, right? Or just in general, a lot of that stuff, right? Like, you solve this huge issue that's in the way, and now suddenly life's good. You know, where, like, these things come. So I think clearing your head and, like, getting yourself in the right path is so important. I'm glad that you've been able to do that over these last couple of weeks.
Yeah. That is going to do it for Always Improving. If you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/ccmdg, and you can ask a question like this one. This is actually an old question, but we're gonna. I think it's relevant. Do you think that? Wait, this is the wrong one. Is it the wrong one? Do you think that Blue Eye Control is a good deck for RCU grinding? Well, not anymore.
No. Just, yeah, I was gonna say we might want to edit here. It's the second part. I just realized that it messed up when I copy pasted it. I didn't even check.
All right.
It's trying to LCQ playing.
Trying to LCQ in Charlotte. well, hope that went well. Since it's local, and I've been jamming energy splashing blue for Consign and Mockingbird. It feels better to me than straight Boros, but Boros has been putting up more top results. I have an opinion on this. I think you should splash in Boros, hands down. I don't care if you're splashing black or blue. I think you should splash in Boros and decide what you're trying to beat. I think the mana is too good not to do it. I think that the cards that you're splashing are too good not to do it. And if I was going to pick up a Boros deck, I would probably be playing the blue version. Just because I expect to I mean, I think it's better against Eldrazi is the main reason, but I 100% would be splashing in this deck.
Yeah, and back to the main point of why we picked it now, though, is how do you decide when you trust your gut versus the data, right? Yeah. And it sounds like to you, you don't even think it's. I guess here's a good question. So you just said that very definitively, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do you decide when to trust your gut versus the data? Because at this point, that was true. Now, I will say, especially as someone who helped popularize the Jeskai energy build, I felt very similar at the time. But like, what did you like? How do you go through that personally? Of like, okay, I feel really strongly about the energy needs to splash no matter what, but everything I look at online tells me I should not splash. How do you sort of solve that?
Yeah, I think that the thing for me is that I've played versus a lot of Boros, and I know that if they have a third color, whatever I'm doing is probably worse. And I would much rather play in straight Boros. And that is a gut feeling. That is like it's Boros. I don't have to expect this, or this. But when they grab a blue land, now Consign's open, Mockingbird's open, there's another card that some of them were playing for a little while. I don't know they're playing. Anyway.
Expressive Iteration?
Yes, some of them are playing that. Like, the whole dynamic changes. And now I have to think more. And to me, like, putting that onus on my opponent to know what the difference could be, especially like in an RCQ or an LCQ, is pretty big.
Okay. I think how I like what you said there. I think how I would answer this for like, in like a broader sense, stepping back a little bit from the energy example, but just like in general, how do I know when to deviate from the data, right? And one part to this is you just never really know if you're right. Like, even if you play the tournament and you win, you might have been wrong. And this has happened lots of times, right? Like, someone plays with their like splash color of a deck, and then as time goes on, it turned out that wasn't actually the best thing to do. Like your mono blue devotion and standard splashing red for this weird sideboard card actually wasn't great. It's awesome you want a GP, but whatever, right? And that's going to happen. But what I like to think about is sort of what are my plans that I'm trying to execute in the game, and do the things that I'm doing that differ from others make sense to me? Because at the end of the day, something making sense is all that I can really sort of do, and I can only do it with the best knowledge I have. So to me, like Spencer talked about with these blue cards, like I just can't beat the Eldrazi threats without Consign, nor some of their answers, right? Like I need to sometimes have an answer to Kozilek's Return as well, and giving up one shock land spot basically, or maybe two depending on your build, is totally reasonable. And then Mockingbird being sort of this way to have more explosive draws in some of your matches, but also at the time block out the breach deck made sense to me and seemed better than having the third Goblin Bombardment. You know what I mean? Or the fourth whatever, the third Static Prison. So at the end of the day, right, it looked like Red White Energy sort of came out as a top dog when it came to results. But I wonder, if we could only play that modern format for 1,000 years, what would have actually happened? And we might never know. And it's about trusting your gut and what makes sense, and then learning from your things, right? Like, oh yeah, all that stuff's really true, but we forgot about this, and this that actually made Boros better this weekend, And yeah, those things are normally true, but this time there was this, and that I think is super important.
If you want to ask questions like this, talk to similar people, head on to the Patreon Discord, or patreon.com/ccftg. You can also leave the YouTube comment. Let us know what you think about this episode, future episodes. Tell us you love us, tell us you hate us. All the interactions matter. And then you can also check us out on Twitter or Blue Sky at ccmtgpod on Blue Sky, or at ccmtg on Twitter. Like, subscribe, review, and of course comment to help the show out. Mason, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. If you want to reach out for coaching, you can do that on the Twitter or my email, masoneclark@gmail.com. Just send me a message and put coaching in the description if it's an email. That way I know it's that. And Spencer, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me at Spencer13H on Blue Sky, at He's a Game on Twitter. I am looking to actually open up coaching a little bit more right now. So hit me up at spencerhowland@gmail.com. I know that Abe, after this RC, is doing the same. You can hit him up everywhere at More Nothings, as well as morenothings@gmail.com. Just put coaching in the description. Mason, that was fun. I'm excited for my tournament this coming week, and I think that people will be more excited for Modern Season with this episode coming out.
I hope so. I hope people enjoyed it.
Is this still your favorite format?
Yeah. Modern's in a great place right now. I think the games are really fun.
Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We'll see you all next time with another episode of CC.
Magic, magic, magic.